Bem-vindos a mais um Mock Class oferecido pela EFIG em parceria aí com a SCC, um college americano, eles que trouxeram um professor aí em parceria conosco. A EFIG, gente, para quem não conhece, nós somos uma agência de educação, tá? Nós oferecemos diversos tipos de programas, então a gente vai ajudar vocês a se candidatar para universidades internacionais, porque como vocês já conhecem, as universidades internacionais não pedem o vestibular, então já podem respirar tranquilos que vocês não precisam, mas vocês precisam de uma série de coisinhas. E a EFIG, com o programa de aconselhamento, vai fazer isso. Então a EFIG, nós temos aí diversos profissionais dentro desse programa que vai ajudar vocês a montar o seu currículo, desde o seu portfólio, seu personal statement, sua essay, orientação para o TOEFL, e aí a seleção das universidades que mais combinam com o seu perfil. É um programa super personalizado. A EFIG também tem programas de férias com parcerias com universidades internacionais, que todo julho, férias de verão, que como vocês sabem, que as férias do hemisfério norte, a estação do hemisfério norte é diferente da nossa, então aí em julho vocês vão poder ir para os Estados Unidos, para o Canadá, para a Irlanda, nessas férias de verão. A EFIG também tem programas de high school, você que está interessado em fazer 6 meses de high school lá fora, por favor nos procurem. Eu vou deixar o meu e-mail e meu telefone no final e a gente pode conversar. Como eu disse, hoje temos o professor Steven Dealey aqui conosco, professor da Santiago Canyon College, um college fantástico, maravilhoso da Califórnia. Ele vai estar falando sobre business, sobre essa área de negócios. De novo, gente, abra o microfone, conversem com esse professor. Esse professor é muito gente boa, muito legal. Eu acho que vai ser uma grande oportunidade. So, thank you very much, Professor, to join us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
All right, well, thank you very much for having me. So I'm just gonna, what I'll do today, I'll give you just a very brief overview of my department at the college, talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to just do a very basic, usually this is the first lecture I have in my class for business communication, all right? So, and at any point, if you've got questions or anything, you can raise your hand or you can type it in the chat area or anything like that, all right? So, all right, so let me go ahead and do this. I need to get screen sharing if that's okay.
There you go, Professor.
Awesome, thank you very much. Now let's make sure I can do this right. Okay, fantastic. All right. So, so hello, my name is Steven Dealey, and I am the professor and department chair for both business and information systems at Santiago Canyon College. And like I said, I'm going to give you a brief overview and then just give you a brief introduction to business communication. So, oops. So that's all I could find. Thank Google for that. That's all I know in Portuguese for right now. So the rest of it will be in English, all right? So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my area and my department. So it is business, but we also have multiple subjects in there. We have accounting, business administration, marketing, management, marketing, and those are, if you're a business administration student, those are probably your main areas of focus. Also, kind of reporting to me are areas of computer science and information systems. So if that's something that possibly interests you as well, we do have lots of courses in that area. We have some courses in industrial robotics, and we also have computer program. I'm going too fast here, my apologies. Computer programming and coding. So if you've got any questions about some of those programs as well, you can run those through Hetza and she can get them to me, and we could also get some information there to you as well. So what I'm gonna do today, I'm gonna give you a brief introduction, because I know most students, when they think of business writing or business communication, have some different thoughts on it. And it is going to be a little different than a lot of the kind of the academic writing and things like that you do. So one of the things I always like to stress with students is, and I know because they've been writing papers in, literature classes, history, social sciences, all those other things, there's and I would imagine, and I don't know the differences between, maybe the US and Brazil, but I would imagine some of the things are similar in terms of academic writing and how that works. And so it is a little different on the business side. So I just want to point a couple of those things out to you as we get started. First off, with business writing, a couple differences there is, one thing I always tell people, it's professional, but also conversational. In other words, your writing should sound like you're having a conversation with someone. Sometimes people think it needs to be real formal, but that's not the case. You also have a purpose behind it. I know that sounds kind of silly because probably all writing has a purpose, but usually in terms in a business situation, and again, it could be writing or any kind of communication. And nowadays, obviously, so much of that's electronic messages, but have a purpose, right? There's a purpose behind it. I'm providing you with information, or I'm asking you for information, or asking you to do something, okay? Another thing, it's very economical. We like to keep it short and to the point. You know, the expression we have in business sometimes is time is money, but I think everybody would prefer to read a short, clear message and get on with their lives, especially now that, I don't know about you, but I can't even see it. There we go. We access most of our email on our phone, so we don't have a big screen to see things. So keeping things short and clear. And then finally, the last part, and sometimes I think this is the most challenging for people, is we keep it focused on our reader. You know, a lot of times I remember, even though it's been many years, being a student and writing papers for various classes, it was always about how do you interpret this? Or what are your thoughts on this, to try and test your knowledge? Whereas in business, it's all about the reader, or all about the audience. And if you ever want a good example of that, just think of a good salesperson. They always say you a lot. You'll love this new phone. You'll love this new car. You look great in those jeans, right? It's always focused on our audience. Okay. And so those are some just things that, you know, throughout the course of a class, I would stress every single week with every single assignment. So some differences that we have between, like I said, your academic writing and your business writing is just how we format it. A lot of times I'll ask people, I'll say, how's business writing different? And they say, oh, it's very formal. Actually, it's not. Okay, we're pretty informal with it. In other words, it doesn't mean we don't want it to look professional or we don't want to speak professionally, but there's not really a given format. Whereas in academic writing, and again, I don't know, there may be some differences, but I'm between, you know, the United States and Brazil, but I'm guessing, you know, the format is very strict. You must double space, you must indent the paragraphs, you have to have footnotes. It's all very formalized in how you write it. And there's a reason behind that, but business, we have a different reason. The focus, what it's for. So in business, we're trying to solve problems. We are, you know, and it doesn't mean a problem necessarily, but it just means we're looking for solutions to things. You know, please send me that report. Here is your report. You know, those kinds of things. It's really all about that. Whereas in academic writing, really what you're trying to do is show knowledge, right? You're trying to show your instructor, professor, or whoever, right, that you understand this topic. You're trying to impress someone. So I know sometimes, and again, I'm sure you have the same experience there. I had classes where teachers would say things like, I want you to be more descriptive or use a bigger vocabulary. And we start looking online for different words to use. We don't want to do that in business because it's all about getting something done. Okay. And time sometimes is of the essence. So the focus is a little different. Your audience is different in business. A lot of times our message or communication goes out to many people. You know, it might be a presentation that I give to many people. It might be a message that I send out, which I'll do today. I have to send out a message to a number of my colleagues about our upcoming semester. It can be for many, many people. I have a relative who works in the public relations field. When she writes things, it goes out to the public and it goes out almost as a news brief, excuse me. So it goes to many people. Whereas academic writing, guess what? Your audience is your teacher or professor. That's it, right? Nobody else is really interested in what you have to say. And so you gear it towards that person. The tone, kind of the tone in our messages. You know, in business writing, we tend to be very direct, and that's not rude. Okay, when I say direct, it doesn't mean rude. I know some people tend to think like, oh, they'll say you're very direct, and they think it's not having tact or anything, but all it means is we kind of get to the point right away. And concise meaning we keep it short. You know, we keep those things. You still are polite, right? But we keep things really direct. I think I had a question there. I saw a hand go up. So you want to unmute your mic and ask me?
Pessoal, vamos usar o microfone. Pode abrir o microfone e falar diretamente com o professor, tá bom?
I'm going to need a little help with that one.
No, Professor. It was just me asking them to open the mic and talk directly to you.
Okay. All right. Because if you want to continue, speak Portuguese, you can say whatever you want about me and I won't.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be rude.
No, it's not rude at all. Don't worry about it. So, but anyway, and then flipping over the tone on the other side, academic writing, we kind of write in the third person and passive voice. It's a much more formal tone, right? And we'll get into this in a little bit. There might also be some cultural differences. I know in the US, we're known for being kind of direct and short and to the point. And I know lots of other countries, even in their business writing, they tend to be a little bit less direct. So sometimes some of the things I say may not always apply in another place, but this is what I know and this is what I'm teaching. So sentences. So one of the things with the sentences, business sentences, we want to use simple words and short sentences. We're just trying to convey information or get something done, right? We're not trying to impress anyone. Whereas in academic writing, sometimes we'll have long sentences, wide vocabulary and those sorts of things. Sometimes when I read academic writing, I almost have to go back and reread it a couple times just to figure out what they were saying. Whereas business writing is very to the point and easy to understand because we want to get things done. All right. And then finally, like the lifespan of our communications, I always think this one's kind of interesting. In business, our communication can be ongoing. I mean, I may send a memo out to my colleagues in the workplace, and that's going to cover some kind of policy or something we have to do forever or for the next 3 months or the next 6 months or whatever. And if you think about, for the most part, most of us as students, our academic writing is limited. There's really, not to say that you don't do a good job and, want to save your papers and things like that you write, but, once you turn it in, once you get that grade, right, generally we're moving on. It has a limited lifespan. Of course, later on, if you ever decide and you want to pursue academic research, that's a different story. But the difference there is, you turn something in, you get your grade, that's it, we're moving on. So those are some of the differences just between academic and business writing. And the reason I like to point that out is because I think sometimes some students come into it thinking that business writing is very formal. You have a very formal tone or something, but we don't want to sound like that. We're not, not like it's a legal document or something like that, right? We're trying to communicate so that we can do business, okay? So today I just wanted to talk about some very, very basic things, business communication, the digital age, I call it. And it's kind of interesting just because the last 6 months, and I'm sure you'd feel the same way as students, we've been thrown into kind of a whole new situation for communicating. We were already doing some of these things, having video conferences, taking classes online and those sorts of things, but now we're doing it 100%, completely 100%. So there's some new and interesting things that I'm trying to incorporate in my classes. And I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of learning some of those things on the fly. I'm learning them real quickly because it's all new and we have to do it. So one thing I always like to show is just the basic idea behind any kind of communication. It's pretty simplified. I have an idea of some kind that I want to convey, and I put that in a message, right? And then I send it over a channel to you. And what that means is just how we do it. It could be, I could actually make a phone call. I don't know, people still do that, right? Maybe it's a text message, maybe it's an email, maybe it's some other type of thing, right? I send that over channel, and then you are the receiver, and then you interpret it, right? And then, or decode that, as we like to say. And then based on how we interpret that message, we give feedback back to the sender. And I think we all know kind of that point where, somebody decodes the message a lot differently maybe than what we intended, especially because now, number one, things are less verbal, right? And it's much more visual and text-based, electronic messages, things like that. So we don't talk, so we miss some of the nuances. But also now I know people that completely communicate, and I don't even know if they use words, right? People are just using emojis and memes and things like that. But it's really easy to misinterpret sometimes. If you're getting a text message from someone or some kind of instant message, it's really easy to misinterpret that sometimes. But the model still stays in place. So today what I want to do is I wanted to point out just some changes, some things that are changing kind of in terms of these things. And this is where I want you to help me out. So I'll hopefully we can come up with some different answers than I'm going to ask you. So there's some different trends in the workplace, and these have actually been going on for many years. And now some of these are like moving very quickly. So The first one, and I'm obviously encountering that today, is we've got global competition, right, in global business. So the question I would have maybe for you is, how does that impact communication, global business? So if I could get a couple different answers from people, and if you could help me and let me know what they're typing out, that would be great. So just how does global business impact communication? Give me some examples of how that comes into play. I can't really see everybody, so. Anyone?
Guys, you can use the chat box as well.
Just type that in there. That'd be great. And then give me a couple different, and I'll add them to the screens here. So thank you. Oh, there, I can see it.
Sorry, Professor, can you just repeat the question?
Oh, sure. So tell me how, just doing business globally, how does that impact communications? What are some challenges we have doing business globally, you know, that are communications related, if that makes sense?
Hi. Oh, I don't know. Can you use the Instagram, for example, for show your business for the world and more people? I don't know.
So I'll start off. I'll give you the biggest one probably that we all encounter. Right? If we're trying to do business globally, we're running into a little bit of that today, obviously, is language, right? How do we communicate with different countries and different places? Language is probably the biggest impediment that we have, right? Or whatever you want to call it, right? Because we've got however many people speaking different languages around the world and all those kind of things. And how do we make that work? And I always think that's the biggest challenge. I tell my students, in the US, we're kind of lucky that English tends to be the language of business around the world a lot of times. People want to learn to speak English. So we're very fortunate from that perspective, you know, but people in other places, right, they need to learn it. And I think where it becomes a challenge sometimes as we get into, and I applaud anybody that speaks multiple languages, because I speak English, a tiny bit of Spanish, I know about 6 phrases in Mandarin Chinese, and that's about it. So I always admire somebody that can speak multiple languages, but I also understand we have to be patient, right? Because I'm guessing most of you, Portuguese is your primary language and English is secondary. And so sometimes you're translating in your head and maybe don't understand, you know, nuances in the language, and that's fine, but that can be a challenge sometimes. Gabriel said, yes, different cultures for sure. Because I know different cultures communicate differently.
Maria, Professor, she said maybe culture different, as Gabriel said, and that may causing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's something I learn even here in the US is, you know, in California, we've got so many different people from so many different places. And one of the things, and I've, you know, over the years before I started teaching, I was a banker and I had, you know, different clients in, you know, Latin America, mostly Mexico at that time, but, you know, in Asia and things like that. And in the US, we do tend to be a little bit direct. Sometimes people think we're rude, but we like to get to the point. We like to do business and get right to it and things like that. And a lot of other parts of the world, they like to take their time and get to know you and establish a relationship, and they're never completely direct with you and things like that. So yeah, just kind of how we go about it. I know another big difference is we tend to be, in the US, we're pretty informal with our colleagues. You know, I don't know too many people that, you know, refer to their bosses by a title, you know, Mr. or Mrs. or whatever. Nobody wants that anymore. You know, even at our college, sometimes I'll be there and someone will refer and they'll say, oh, President Hernandez. And I'll think, who's that? And then I go, oh yeah, it's John, because, although he just left. But anyway, the point is we like first name basis with a lot of people. And I know in other cultures, that's very different. That can be very, very different.
In Brazil, it's still very conservative, Professor. In Brazil, many companies, when it's like, sir.
Right.
Mrs., Mr., and at universities, we always say like doctor and all this kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I would say doctor. Doctor's the one exception, because I know here in the US, it doesn't matter if it's a medical doctor or a PhD. If you don't use the term doctor, they always correct you.
Yes.
Right away. But no, but that is one thing that is very different, is I think we tend to be a little more, and it's probably similar in places like Canada, United Kingdom, those kind of countries. But I know, yeah, South America, Latin America, Asia, Middle East, yes, people are very formal that way. And so that's a big difference. So what else besides language and cultures are the two big ones, obviously. And
maybe, I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Maybe you need to choose the best idea to present for the public or your company, and it's very difficult for the competition, and you ever need to be the best.
So yeah, I think so. One of the other things, yeah, I mean, that's true. Yeah, a lot of different ideas and how we look at things. Probably a lot of these things all fall under culture. I know another thing in the United States, we don't mind one person making a decision if they're in charge and things like that. And I know in other places, sometimes it's very much, they have to meet and discuss it and take their time and everything else. So some of those things can vary different. There's other simple things, like this is a pretty obvious one we're encountering today, the time zone that people are in. You have to think about that. It's still morning for me. I know you guys are middle of the afternoon. That's not too bad, but with the global economy, I know plenty of people that have meetings at weird times of the day because, they have to meet with someone who's in Switzerland or someone who's in Australia or something along those lines. So language, cultures, time zones, and then the other thing obviously would be different laws and things like that. And we're seeing some of that kind of unfold in the US because we're reevaluating our relationship with China a little bit. And so it'll be interesting to see how some of that works, but it affects communications. They're talking about, I think, taking away the, the WeChat application that is used for folks to communicate in China. And I know many people from China. That's how I communicate with them when they go over there. And it's going away. And so they're going to have to come up with some other ways to communicate and things. But I think that's one thing I think you can definitely see. There's probably other things you can think of globally that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, language, cultures, times. I mean, obviously you could also say currency with different money, but that's a little less specific to communication. Another trend we have, and it's definitely going on in the US, but I think it's going on everywhere, is what we call flat and hard, because there's just a lot fewer layers in companies now. There used to be a lot of managers and a lot of hierarchy with communications and things like that. And I think now companies have to react more quickly to changes in the world. And so there isn't a lot of time to do that. So it might turn out you work for a company or institution where you're frontline employee, but maybe there's not too many people between you and the chairman of the company or something along those lines. And so communication moves a lot more quickly. It also means that sometimes if you're communicating with your bosses, people that are really in charge of things might see it a little more quickly than they did in the past. And so that's one of those things where everything, and another thing that goes along with that, and again, it may be very different in Brazil, but I know in the US with customers, customers don't want to just talk to the employee anymore. Sometimes they don't want to talk to the manager. Sometimes they get mad and they send a tweet out to the CEO, or something like that.
That's very common in Brazil.
Oh, they go around it too?
Okay. Always.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then I don't need to tell you, you probably are experts at it compared to us. Yeah. I mean, no, it's the same thing. I find the same thing with students at the college. They don't necessarily come to me or my boss with a problem. They walk right into the vice president's office. So, or send a message or something like that. So we got to be aware of that it's coming in different directions. Another thing too, and I'm sure you experience as a student, is a lot more what we call team-based management, where you're working with your peers, right? And you're trying to get something done. You do group projects in school, I'm sure. I know students don't always like them for various reasons. Sometimes it's hard to get your fellow students to do the same amount of work as you. And how do you regulate that and do all those things? And I'm finishing up a summer school class, and almost all my groups did really well, but I had one or two where there were some issues. One of their teammates kind of disappeared, then showed up at the very end. How do you communicate with those people? If I'm your boss, it's pretty easy for me to ask you to do something. I don't demand it. I would say, can you please do this task? And you do it because you like your job and you'd like to keep it. And it's kind of easy because I actually have authority over you. When everybody's the peers, it's a little different. And sometimes something might be really important to me, but it's not as important to some of my peers in the team because they have other priorities. And I know as students, one of the things that happens sometimes with the groups, and again, I'm guessing you have all gone through this, is you might have a group of 4 students and you've got 2 students that are very, very, very motivated and they want to get the best grade possible. And then the other 2 people in their group maybe want to go, what do we need to pass the class? And so the workload isn't there. And so it requires a different set of communication skills. How can you motivate these people to do it? And those sorts of things. And I think the other thing you find too is some people are very responsive. You send someone a text, you send someone an email, they respond pretty quickly. There's other people where it has to be email, text, leave them a message, knock on their door, and you still can't get a hold of them. And so these can be some challenges there. And now, especially too, because physically we're not in the same place, so I don't have the option of going and finding you on the campus or in the office building or something like that. And so it requires a different skill set altogether. And I think everybody's learning because it's, some of this stuff has happened so fast. I think we know this one pretty well because we're doing it right now, all the different communications technology. Wow, I'm so old to remember when never mind. I don't want you to know how old I am, but some of those things, it's very funny to me that people don't even know what a fax machine is anymore. But, it's great. There's so many ways to get a hold of people. There's so many things that you can do. I can send people documents. I can do this. I can do that. All these things. We can have this meeting through this video conferencing, which I don't know if this technology didn't exist. I don't know how schools and businesses would be surviving things right now. We may have made some different decisions. We have a lot of innovative communications technology, but they come with challenges, right? I think to me, one of the challenges sometimes is it's great because I can get a hold of people anytime, but I also don't like that people can get a hold of me anytime. Sometimes you have to step away and things like that. Another challenge, and some of you probably know this, heck, even in your own families, because we have so many ways to contact people now, whether I call them on the phone or text them or send them an email or send them direct messages through social media. And what's popular down there? Is WhatsApp a popular communications tool down there? Or I'm trying to recall. I know I tried to read up on it a little bit. But anyway, there's so many different ways to get a hold of people. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to contact different people. I'm not sure. Even in my own family. My parents, I call them on the phone. They have an old-fashioned landline. My brother, I can email him because I know he's checking it at work. I can text my niece. I have no idea how to get a hold of one of my nephews. I have another one. I send him messages through Instagram because I know he's constantly posting pictures of him surfing, so I don't know how to get a hold of people sometimes. And it can be very, very, can be a challenge sometimes. But on the other hand, again, we have a lot of great technology. And I think, we were already starting to do lots of things via video conference like this. And I think just ever since, it's been almost 6 months now, 5 months really, since the COVID kind of shut us all down, we've been forced into it. And I will bet you in your classes this fall, your teachers will be much better at this and you'll be much better at it because we've had a lot more practice now doing classes and things like that this way. And we're going to continue to have all kinds of new things. I mean, I know another thing, I'm interviewing someone this afternoon to teach part-time at our college. I'm never going to meet that person. Maybe next February or March, maybe. I have no idea. And that's very strange to me. Maybe it's not for you. I actually found students are pretty good with the Zoom in the classes and things like that. You're actually better than some of us teachers. I think that's because you all grew up FaceTiming each other and things like that.
Remember, Professor, I think was at my time, I used to use ICQ.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. I remember that was like a instant messaging.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Well, and there are other apps like that now. Like lots of people are using in the workplace, Microsoft Teams, and I know quite a number of people that they're completely, well, and that actually takes me to my next one, right? Which is new work environments. I'm at my kitchen counter right now. So that's my classroom now. And I have the backdrop because I don't want you to see all the stuff on my shelves. But we have all new work environments now, people working from home, and that was already starting to change. We don't have to be in an office anymore, and things like that. Some jobs, I mean, if you work in a restaurant, you can't really do that virtually. But we have all new kinds of work environments, and it's going to mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people. With that, I know someone I was speaking to yesterday, they use the Microsoft Teams application, and one of the things they have to do is they have to log in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they have to be on there just like they're in the office in a way, and logged in and available for someone to get a hold of them. So that changes things up a little bit. I kind of like this because I no longer have to drive 30 minutes to school. I'm saving money. I'm saving money on gas, all those kinds of things. So, it does add a whole different thing to think. I think the most difficult thing is sometimes it's a little harder to get a hold of people when we're all, spread out that way. But yeah, it's very, and it's going to continue to change how and where we can work. I know some people here in California that now they're working from home all the time. They don't want to go back to an office whenever that can happen. And I don't know if you're aware of that or not down there, but California is a very expensive place to live. And I know some people that they're like, I'm moving elsewhere where it's less expensive. I don't have to be in an office. I'm just on a screen all day, and I can do that in my really big house in Arizona, or something like that. And so, yeah, we're definitely seeing that. And there's probably things I'm not even thinking of right now. And then the last kind of trend is a much more diverse workforce. I've lived most of my life in Southern California, and it's kind of always been that way. You could talk about, you have people from, different countries, different cultures, different religions. In a lot of jobs, I think one of the biggest changes here in the US has just been the change in some jobs used to be very much mostly male, and now you have sometimes more females than males. I know, for instance, even at our college, we have more female faculty members than male faculty members overall. And that's a pretty big change over 25 or 30 years ago. And even I always laugh and go, just look at your families now. And I'm sure I know Brazil's a very diverse country as well. So you have to keep that in mind when you're communicating. I know people don't like to bring some of those things up sometimes, but we're raised differently in different cultures. We communicate differently. Some people are very direct, some are not. I don't want to get in trouble, but I know men and women communicate differently. And so we have those kinds of things. Again, people coming from different countries, different languages, all those things, a number of years ago, more than 20 years ago, I was a bank manager in the Los Angeles area. I had about 20 employees total in my office. And when we hired employees, one of the things they put on their form was if they spoke other languages, because you often need help, especially in a place like that, you often need somebody to help translate a business conversation for you. That's all it is. And I remember getting all the results back, and I think amongst 20 employees, we had like 9 or 10 different languages spoken in that office. And so it's kind of interesting just to see all those changes. But what it does mean is people communicate a lot differently. And then adding that on top of all the technology can definitely lead to some circumstances where we can be misunderstood. So one of the things that there's a term we use, and it's just because we all are misunderstood from time to time. Sometimes that's on us as the communicator, right? And sometimes that's on our audience, so they're maybe not necessarily paying attention or whatever. And sometimes there's nothing we can do about that, but we can certainly be better on our end. And the term that kind of covers all of it is just something called bypassing. And And what that means is the receiver of the message either misunderstands what you said or wrote or whatever, or they miss the meaning altogether. And that's why it's really important to try and be clear, especially because, you know, so much of the communications now is, it's not live like we are right now, or if we were talking on the phone, it's an email message or something like that, right? A text message or whatever. And we're not able to give feedback right away, right? If we're talking to someone, if somebody asks me a question, well, I'll give you a scenario. This has probably happened to some of you. You send someone a message asking them a question. Doesn't matter, email, instant message, text, whatever. You send them a message, ask them a question, and they don't respond immediately. And sometimes text can feel like a conversation. And you don't hear from them for 15 minutes or a half hour, and then they come back and they answer your question. Obviously, they were doing something else. Imagine if that was a face-to-face conversation, right? You asked me a question, and I walked away, and then came back 15 minutes later and answered your question. That's what it feels like sometimes. So it's easy to misunderstand things in those electronic messages. Whereas if we're having a conversation, whether it's here on camera or over the phone, or someday in the future when we can talk to people face to face again, you get that immediate feedback, and you know, you can usually solve a lot of things in a minute or two. I'm sure some of you have had this, you've had an exchange via text with someone or via email, and sometimes it can be over, you know, a few hours or days if it's email, and there's some kind of misunderstanding, and we pick up the phone and we talk to them and we figure everything out in 2 or 3 minutes, right? And so that's sometimes, I think there's even more misunderstandings because of all the electronic communications. So some things that happen with this, just some barriers that cause misunderstanding, different frames of reference. And all that means is maybe we have different jobs, and so we look at the information differently. You know, the manager is going to look at a piece of information differently than the employee, okay? The example I always like to use is the same piece of information can be interpreted very differently by teenagers versus their parents, right? If you're a teenager and you hear, I don't know, this happens down there, I'm sure this is universal throughout the world, and you hear somebody's parents are gone and they're having a party, if you're the teenager, this might be the best night of your life, right? You're gonna have a good time. Your parents hear that and they're locking you in the house. And that's because you have different frames of reference. You know, in the workplace, the boss and somebody will have different perspectives. Students and teachers have different perspectives. So sometimes we're going to interpret those things a little bit differently. As I like to tell the students, a common example might be if we hear maybe there's going to be some changes because our budget's going to be lowered, which is something that happened. As a student, you might be thinking, oh, that's fewer classes or bigger classes, or maybe tuition is going up or something like that. And for me, I'd be thinking about how does that affect my job? Same information, two different interpretations. A lack of language skills, and this could be things on multiple levels, like we're talking about today. I'm probably talking too fast for some of you, and I apologize. I've had coffee and I'm a little nervous. But I recognize that if English isn't somebody's first language, they might need a little more time to process things, right? Especially maybe technical terms or slang phrases or something like that. It could also mean, though, even in the same language, maybe somebody is very educated and uses a certain vocabulary, maybe versus somebody who doesn't have the same vocabulary. So sometimes the actual language skills can be different. That can cause misunderstanding.
And
I've
also,
had...
I'm sorry, Professor, and also depends of the area as well. For example, if you are working in a communication company in the different departments. So if you're working
Right.
in the communication company from like... For
sure.
Yeah, like business and another projector management from this department talking to someone from the, I don't know, from the people who are putting their hands in the machines and all this kind of stuff.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah,
well, you want a good example of that? Anytime you talk to somebody who's an expert to help you fix your technology, you know, we don't know. We're like, what button is that? And they give you 10 different instructions to try and fix your computer. That's a really good example. Yeah. But that's again, one of those areas where that can cause some misunderstanding. A lack of listening skills. I mean, probably we're all guilty of not listening as well as we should for various reasons. I actually do a little piece on that further down the road in the class. But a lot of times people just aren't listening, you know. And one of the things I think that I know I struggle with is, I know for a lot of people, I tend to listen for words, like what are somebody saying? And I know lots of other people look at it more emotionally. They're like, how did they say it? You know, so that can be the case, or as we well know, and I'll get to in a second, we know people just aren't listening. Emotional interference. And what that means is sometimes it's hard to communicate with somebody if they're upset. If you've ever, you know, been trying to communicate with someone when something isn't going right, there's emotional interference coming in. You know, a lot of times in the workplace or even working with students, if they've got something going on outside of work or outside of the classroom, you know, that's maybe upsetting or something, it's hard to communicate things with them and you have to wait. It can be the other way around too. Sometimes if somebody's really, really, really happy about something, it's really difficult to communicate with someone. Many years ago, I had an employee that I needed to sit down, and she was okay, but we needed to work on her job performance. And I wrote up the thing over the weekend, and I was going to sit down and talk to her Monday, and she got engaged over the weekend. So I decided it was probably best to wait a couple days before giving her some bad news. I didn't want to completely wreck it. It wasn't bad news. She kept her, she just needed to improve. But with somebody's really happy or really upset, it's really hard to communicate with them. And then finally, physical interference or distractions. Those are also things that can get in the way. I mean, you know, it could just be something as simple as somebody's trying to talk to you from the other side of the house, to you're trying to talk to someone on a cell phone and it's bad reception. I also think physical interference, I would include distractions. I know people are multitasking all the time now, you know, since we have these wonderful devices in our hands, and getting people to pay attention. And those can cause misunderstanding as well, because people are not necessarily going to be paying attention. So some ways we can address that, how we can overcome these things, just realize it's not perfect. I know it's really frustrating. I'm sure all of you have at some point had to repeat something to someone because they didn't hear the first time or the second time or the third time, or they misunderstood. Or my favorite is somebody will get a hold of me and ask me a question. I said, well, I did put that in the email. And they said, oh, I didn't read it. They just open it up, but they never read it. And then they just pick up the phone and call me. So it's going to be imperfect. No matter how good a job you do, right? A lot of it's dependent on the other side. Adapt your message to the receiver. You know, if you know that somebody, and there are people, and they'll probably be fewer and fewer, they're just old like me. There are people that prefer to talk on the phone and clarify things that way still, if you can get a hold of them. There are others who are good with the email. You know, there's others that you're going to need to communicate with other ways. You're going to, you know, if you're interested in business, you know, we think of business, it's a lot about numbers and finance and all that. I can tell you from having a career in that, just giving someone a financial statement, some people are fine with that. I'm fine with that. You show me numbers, data, I'm fine with that. I can look through it. I know other people that they look at that and they like, oh. But if you make graphs or charts or something like that, pretty colors and that sort of thing, it's easier to tell your story to those people. So try and change your message a little bit, you know, and that's something you learn over time. Sometimes you don't know right away, but you know, the more you work with someone, you figure it out. Okay. We all learn to do that. Heck, I learned to do that when I was a teenager with my parents, right? I knew how to adapt my message to tell my dad something versus my mom, because they always reacted very differently. Improve your language and listening skills. You know, again, sometimes just reading is really helpful. If you read good writing, it improves your language and vocabulary. And also listening. You know, there's a concept in communications called active listening. And, you know, they talk about things like, I think the number one thing, if I was going to tell anybody, would just be get rid of the distractions. You know, if you're trying to listen to somebody, you know, put the phone away for a few minutes, take notes, ask questions, you know, those kinds of things. It's funny, we learn to speak pretty young, and we might even take a speech class later on. We learn to read and write, I don't know, 5 years old, whatever that we start to. We take reading and writing classes. We never really learn how to listen. I think the only listening lesson I ever got was my mom telling me, listen to me. That's about it. So, and that the miscommunications with that can cost us time and money sometimes. Another thing too, question your preconceptions. I'm sure some of you have teachers where they get up and lecture and they're like, oh God, they're boring. They never say anything, da, da, da. And I get it. I'm sure my students say that about me sometimes. But you have to still listen to them and question those preconceptions. I've had coworkers in all kinds of places where I'm like, oh no, they're talking again. And I tune them out. A lot of times it's worth tuning out, but other times you really need to listen to them because there's going to be something there that they have to say. And another place where you'll encounter that too, especially probably early on, and some of you probably already are in jobs, is with customers, right? And listening to customers. We have certain preconceptions sometimes about different customers. And so we kind of have to try anyway to set those aside and listen to what they have to say so that we can help them, which ultimately is better for our business. And finally, encourage feedback. I know some people just like to give information and then walk away, but you have to allow people to ask questions and to clarify things and that sort of thing. And the one thing I'll say, is going back to that first one, realize it's imperfect. You can do the best job possible. You can keep improving your skills. You can do all these things, but it's not going to be perfect, right? I said, some people you have to repeat and do things over and over again. And you learn from it and you get better. I find that as a teacher. I mean, I just went through it recently. We just are wrapping up a summer class. I've done it for many years. I'm better at it. I'm lecturing online. I send them messages. I do all this stuff. And 2 days before the final paper's due, someone emails me and says, what's the story with this final paper? Do we have to do this? And I kept thinking, how many times have I told you already, right? But it's just one of those things you have to realize that it's going to be imperfect, okay? So that's just a quick little introductory lecture I had about business communications. You're welcome to keep those slides. I think they're probably recording it. Let me know if they want a copy of those. But that's just what, the starting point for my class. And when I teach it, we do different things. I have you write some different kinds of business messages. I have you work in a group to put together a short business research paper. I also have students do presentations, presenting their information, because that's something we do in business all the time. And I think that it's a really valuable skill. I like them in person, but guess what? We're not doing that right now. So my students are learning, just like I am, to present these topics online through Zoom this way. And I just watched last week 15 of them. And we're learning. We're learning how to do that, but I think that's important. And I told them that, guess what? You're going to need to do this at least through the end of 2020, learning to do this online. And guess what? More and more jobs are going to be done this way. You're going to be interviewing this way. And so it's a really good opportunity, I think, to improve your skills in this setting. I think most of us, if we were trying to, especially let's say a job interview, I'd much rather do that in person. I feel like I have a better opportunity to connect with the people and persuade them, but we have to learn how to do things this way as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity today. Excuse me. I'm happy to take any questions anyone has, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think, Professor, let's open a very quick discussion, because we do have time yet, and about this communications, because you guys are everybody at home, doing all your school stuff at home here in Brazil, and I'm quite sure in the US as well. So what do you think, guys, about this communication that Professor told us and gave this amazing lecture about this communication in the business? What do you guys think about it? And I'll be very happy if you guys can open your microphone to talk to us, please. Communication, guys. I have some student here, Professor, who talks very well, but I don't know why they're very shy.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Their English is better than my Portuguese, so
I think knowing how to communicate well is half of the way to sell your product, I would say, because you have to know how to communicate with the people you're selling it to, right?
Yes, definitely. And so, yeah. And so I think, I know we all sort of have sometimes, and I'm sure it's the same thing in Brazil, some salespeople, we sort of have a cartoon character of them going, I got a deal for you, you know, that kind of thing. And so sometimes we're like, hey, wait a minute. But I will tell you this, good salespeople are very good at reading the situation, you know, especially in person. They can ask questions, they get a lot of feedback. I think it would be a lot harder to do via video this way. I think you could still do it, but it'd be a lot harder. And but I think, yeah, you have to not only know your product. I think that's really important, because I'm sure any of you just think about going and getting a new phone, right? I'm sure you've all done that plenty of times. And you talk to someone and they can't really answer your questions about the phone. Maybe they're new, maybe they just don't know, whatever it is. And you're going to kind of back off a little bit. You're going to be like, oh, I don't know, this person doesn't really, but whereas someone who's really knowledgeable, you may or may not want it, but at least, you know, that helps, that gives them credibility, right? If somebody knows about their product. And then the other thing again is understanding the situation. You know, like I said, good salespeople, you know, are able to kind of read people and ask questions and think, you know, they can find out, you know, do you really want to buy a phone today? Or are you just kind of looking, or you hear it with your friend? Or if you know, obviously if you walk in and the screen's cracked and everything else, they know that they're going to be able to sell you a phone, but just kind of reading the situation. I think they're really good at that too.
That's good. And Gabrielle, professor, she's asking, how do you know the correct way to speak to each person? That's a very good question, actually.
No, that is a good question. So I think obviously if it's new to us, right? Because some of the things I talk about, you know, when they're work related, you know, you're going to work with people for months and years and things like, you get to know them as well as you get to know your family. And so that is a little different, but initially we don't always know, right? I think that's where the question is. So I think generally it's always better to be maybe a little less formal initially, even here, you know, in the US where we're, you know, like I said, we like first name basis. I mean, I would walk up to somebody and, you know, say, oh, hello, you know, hello, Mr. Valerio, how are you? And he would say, oh, please call me Diego, you know, and then I would know to do that then in that situation, right? So I think it's always better to be a little too formal, maybe initially, and let them tell you it's okay to be casual. It's kind of like dressing for a job interview. Some companies are informal, right? Very informal, but it's better to go in the interview if you're a man, wear a shirt. It's better to dress up and then have them tell you, no, you can do less. And I think the same way with communicating that way, just be a little bit more formal, you know, polite and things like that. And again, we learn as time goes on. I know that's hard though with new communications, like a job interview. We don't know those people and things like that. The other thing that we can do now too, though, is sometimes we can do a little bit of research online. We can find out more about the company or more about the product. Sometimes even a little bit about that person, you know, but I'd say initially we always want to be we want to be, you know, more, what's the word I'm looking for? Deferential. We want to be a little more formal and then let them tell us we can be less formal. Sounds to me like if people are more formal in how they address people in Brazil, you'll be much better at that than a lot of Americans, where we like to jump in right away and say, hey, what's going on? Like, please call me Dr. So-and-so, you know. Thanks.
Anyone else wants to address anything? Maria, she's asking here, she said she can't open her mic, unfortunately, because she got a microphone issue, but she said, thank you so much. I've never thought of doing anything related to business, but now I'm considering. I learned a lot. It was very interesting.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. You know, we all end up doing something with business, even if we study something else. So, or as I like to always tell people, you know, they'll ask, and you probably get the same questions, you know, people want to study a certain area and like, oh, what kind of jobs are in that? Or what are they going to do? And I just say, everybody's going to get a job at some point. So you need to know something about business. Even people, we work at the college, not just because I teach it, but we have to understand how our organization works a little bit. And that's got some business principles. And no matter what anyone does, I mean, even somebody who, let's say somebody wants to go into psychology and they want to become a therapist, or a lot of medical related fields, you may be doing that, but at the same time, your practice is a business, right? And so you have to be able to understand and run that part of it as well. So thank you.
That's very true. That's very true. Any job that you're going to do, you have to have some management skills. Otherwise,
I wish I had taken psychology classes in college. As soon as I became a manager, you're not just a manager, you're also like almost like a therapist with your employees. So
true. That's true. Anyone else? And please open your mic, guys. You seem very quiet today. You always talk a lot.
it's okay. I'm used to this.
Professor is from California, so he's almost a Brazilian. So please, guys, feel like you guys at home.
Same weather.
Same weather.
Same weather. I miss going to football matches.
Has anyone wants to ask any questions about any? If you're considering, for example, Maria, she's considering to do business, and because she felt very interesting. So, has anyone got any questions about what is the subjects that you're going to learn? For example, if you want to ask the professor, because some of you guys are on the grade 12. I know some of you are in grade 10. But if you're considering and follow this career of business, maybe you guys are thinking, wow, what I'm going to see on the business class. So that's the opportunity for you now.
Well, one thing I would mention too, if I know some people are very focused and they know they're like, yeah, I'm going to study business and I want to be in marketing or I want to be in accounting, and that's great. But if you're just kind of curious, and you could probably find this at almost any college anywhere, is take an introductory class. We offer a class, it's called Introduction to, I think it's called Introduction, whatever it is, it's our Business 100 class. And it covers a lot of different topics. We talk a little bit about economics. We talk a little bit about management, marketing, and finance. It covers a little bit of everything. And that's a good way to get exposed to the subject. And for a lot of people, they're like, yes, I love this. I want to study this. And sometimes there are people like, I'm going back to something else. I mean, but so that's good. A good thing to do rather than diving right into the whole major right away. And that you can do that with any subject, take an introductory college class that gives you kind of an overview of the topic, and, kind of helps you decide whether or not you want to do it.
That's great. Professor, you just told us to be formal, and then you see how the thing goes. And Gabrielle started making this, following your advice. So she asked it here, how do you see if your profile matches with the business area like you, sir, Mr.?
Well, that's a really good question. So, like I said, I think a good way to do that, if you're just more, kind of curious and things like that, like I said, is just take a basic introductory class. That kind of almost most colleges in the US have some sort of introductory business class. It just kind of covers a lot of different topics. And that's a good way to get started, just to see those things. And sometimes it isn't even necessarily something now. To be honest, when I was an undergraduate student, I wanted to go to law school and I was a political science major. And I got about 3 years into my education and said, I don't want to be a lawyer. So I just finished up and I just jumped in and started working, and I found that I had a good aptitude for the numbers and things like that. Although I didn't have a business education as an undergraduate. And then later on, I went to graduate school in order to bolster my credentials. So sometimes you don't know these things, right away. I mean, another great way to find out if you've got family members, family businesses and things like that, ask people questions and things along those lines. Because again, it's not everybody, everybody's got different aptitudes for things. And sometimes you don't always discover those right away, right when you're coming out of high school. Like I said, sometimes you have professionals in other areas that, I always think to a friend of mine who's a dentist, he was dentist, and then had nothing to do with business. And then as time went along, he's like, I better learn about business because, half my job is fixing people's teeth. The other half is paying my employees and running a business. So, I would say try to take some sort of introductory class, and just, just read up on it a little bit. Go in the news and whatever news, provider you look at online, and just click on business and see, if there are things there that, might interest you or something like that. I know right now what I see a lot of, and you know what else? It'll take you away from reading about all the politics and all the pandemic stuff for the most part. But also you get to read a lot of articles now, and it talks about how companies are adjusting to everything, the changes that they're having to make. I know one thing I see here in the US, like, a restaurant, suddenly they have to figure out how to do takeout orders for people. And I was at a place yesterday where they had tables set up everywhere outside. I think we were in the parking lot again. But just reading about how businesses are kind of adjusting to this. And so those can be some other ways, right, to sort of, get some knowledge. But definitely an introductory class is a great way.
Okay, great. Has anyone got any questions or any thing you want to address? All right, so I think, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us. It was amazing. I think most of the students enjoyed a lot, and I'm 100% sure a lot of students, as Maria, they are now considering to do business on their undergraduate courses and follow this career. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So now, Jetsa, if you want to jump here. Guys, now I'm just going to hand to Jetsa very quick so she can show you, introduce you a little bit about this amazing college where Professor Stephen Dealey and Jetsa Torres are from. Just very quick, it's a community college in California, Orange County. Very amazing buildings. I know some of you guys were here when Professor was doing some mock class about biomedicine and biotechnology. So if you're not, please just listen to Jetsa about this amazing opportunity. Thank you very much, Jetsa. Sorry, Jetsa, you're mute. We cannot hear. Right now, yeah.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. Well, I'm Jetsa Torres. I'm the director of the International Student Program here at Santiago Kenyan College. We said SCC for short. Well, SCC, like Diego says, is a community college. So for those of you who might not know, hear about U.S. community colleges. So let me briefly say that many high school students choose to attend community college due to several good reasons. For example, one reason, colleges offer associate's degree. So associate degree means you attend, for example, SEC full-time for 2 years, you will earn an associate degree, which means having completed 2 years of your bachelor's degree. So you guys know that to earn a bachelor's degree takes 4 years. If you go, obviously, full-time. Okay, so students with an associate degree easily get accepted into prestigious universities. So this is another good reason to come to a community college. Also, colleges offer high quality education and obviously cost less than universities, making this a good option for those who want to save money. Okay, so now let me share some highlights about SEC. So SEC is a fully accredited, high-ranked college that is located in the city of Orange, California. If you look at the map where Disneyland is, we're very close to Disneyland. We are very close to Anaheim, California, and actually that's where I do live. We are one of the newest community colleges in California. We have new modern facilities with state-of-the-art equipment. Also, SEC offers excellent degree programs, and you just hear about one, business. And these are degrees that are in high demand, taught by excellent, professional, highly qualified professors like Professor Stephen Dealey. Our class size is small compared to if you go to a university, there will be hundreds of students in the classroom. So here, our class size, like I said, is 30 students. Our tuition, it's very affordable. It's $8,304 to be exact a year. And we have great support services at SEC available for the students, great resources, and this is at no additional cost. Our school is very diverse. We have 135 international students from 25 different countries, and our school environment is very friendly and safe. So for more information or any question, please feel free to contact us or visit our webpage. We will be happy to see you, to welcome you to our school in the near future. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you very much, Jetsa. Thank you very much for one more time here with us and share this partnership that we do have. And guys, if you want to have more information about SEC, please, I just pop up my email address and my phone number. Please feel free to contact me, and then I'll put you in touch with Jetsa, and then maybe we can apply you to study at SEC, hopefully next year. Jetsa, how are the things in SEC regarding to learning? They are fully online. How are the things?
Yes, absolutely. Well, for the fall semester, our college is following a hybrid model. When I say hybrid, means we have a combination of classes online, remote, and classes that are in person. We have actually 5 different modes of instruction. So 3 of them are remote. And the other 2, it's one that we call hybrid, and the other one it's in person. So like, for example, soccer, right? How can you do that in Zoom, right? How can you do that? So it has to be in person. Also, biotechnology, those science classes that need lab or computer classes, right? So those will be a combination of lectures via Zoom online and also in person.
That's great. Thank you very much.
So
guys, I'm going to talk in Portuguese very quick now. Thank you very much for all your attending here, for your time. Muito obrigado, galera, por participar de mais mock class. Essa semana é a semana do business. Na quarta-feira nós vamos ter aí a presença de um professor de uma universidade de Barcelona falando de introdução a business. Então vamos pegar a dica que o professor Steven Dilley deu, que é participar dessa parte de introdução ao business e participar desse mock class. Convide seus amigos da sua escola para participar, porque eu acho que vai ser bem bacana. E também só contar para vocês, em outubro vamos ter aí o EFIG Talks, um evento virtual. Vamos trazer 60 universidades para vocês conversarem e vocês vão concorrer a prêmios. Jetsa will be attending EFIG Talks. Então, por favor, venham até o EFIG Talks, vocês vão receber mais informações aí no decorrer desse mês. Mas é isso, galera. Eu quero agradecer muito a presença de cada um de vocês e a gente se vê na quarta-feira. Muito obrigado.